The dirty dishwater splattered across Ethan's white dress shirt in grotesque arcs, lukewarm, greasy, reeking of yesterday's rotted vegetables. As his mother-in-law Rebecca stood over him, with the empty basin still trembling in her manicured hands, her diamond rings catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the country club's floor-to-ceiling windows. His wife Vanessa and her lover Derek erupted into laughter from the adjacent table, their champagne glasses raised in mock celebration. The divorce papers Derek had just served him scattered across the linen tablecloth like confetti at a funeral. Ethan's hands shook as he wiped the filth from his eyes, unaware that his mother, Catherine Blackwell, who had died in her sleep just 4 days ago in what doctors called a peaceful passing, had been a multi-billionaire. A fact she'd hidden from everyone, including her only son, for reasons that would soon tear this family apart in ways none of them could imagine. The family hangout that was supposed to be a casual Sunday brunch had transformed into a public execution, and what Ethan was about to do in response would crush Vanessa completely and leave Rebecca, her mother, so devastated that she would spend the rest of her life trying to undo this single afternoon. But how does a man who's been treated like garbage his entire marriage suddenly discover he's inherited billions? What secrets had his mother been keeping that would turn his humiliation into their destruction? And what could Ethan possibly do in this moment of utter degradation that would be powerful enough to shatter the lives of everyone who had just laughed at him? Ethan Montgomery had learned long ago that silence was safer than protest. As the greasy water dripped from his collar onto the Italian marble floor of the Willowbrook Country Club, that lesson echoed through his mind like a prayer he'd memorized through repetition rather than faith. The other diners had gone quiet, their forks suspended midair, their conversations dying like candle flames in a sudden draft. He could feel their stares, some horrified, some curious, some barely concealing their amusement at watching a man get what the wealthy always assumed poor people deserved. "That's what happens when you forget your place," Rebecca hissed, setting the basin down with a metallic clang that made several nearby women flinch. She was a woman who had spent 63 years perfecting the art of cruelty disguised as social refinement. Her silver hair styled in a way that cost more than most people's monthly rent, her St. John knit suit the color of old money and fresh contempt. "You come to my daughter's brunch looking like some homeless vagrant, embarrassing us in front of our friends. Someone needed to clean you up." Vanessa's laughter was the worst part, not Derek's, the personal trainer she'd been sleeping with for the past 8 months, whose muscles seemed inversely proportional to his intelligence, whose presence at this family hangout was an insult Ethan was apparently expected to swallow along with his humiliation. No, it was his wife's laughter that cut deepest. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of her slowly transforming from the woman who'd once looked at him with something resembling affection into this stranger who found joy in his degradation. "Oh God, Mom, you actually did it!" Vanessa gasped between peals of laughter, her hand resting possessively on Derek's forearm, her engagement ring, the one Ethan had saved for 6 months to buy, still on her finger like a trophy she was too cruel to remove. "I didn't think you'd actually throw the dishwater on him." "Someone had to teach him some respect," Rebecca said, dabbing at imaginary moisture on her own pristine outfit. "After everything our family has done for him, and he shows up late, looking like he rolled out of bed." "My mother died 4 days ago," Ethan said quietly. The words felt strange in his mouth, too small for the enormity they represented. "The funeral was yesterday. I haven't been sleeping." The silence that followed was brief, surgical in its precision, before Rebecca's face hardened into something uglier than before. "Oh, please. That woman barely raised you anyway, didn't she? Catherine was what? A bookkeeper? A secretary? Something equally forgettable?" Rebecca waved her hand dismissively, as if his grief were cigarette smoke she could disperse with a gesture. "Some people are born to serve, Ethan. Your mother understood that. Perhaps it's time you did too." If she had known, if any of them had known, that Catherine Blackwell had died as the silent majority shareholder of Blackwell Industries, a technology conglomerate worth $37 billion, that single comment might have remained unspoken. But secrets have their own gravity, and Catherine had kept hers locked away for 34 years. ever since the night she'd walked away from her father's empire, with nothing but a newborn son and a determination that Ethan would never be corrupted by the wealth that had destroyed her own family. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It had been buzzing all morning, unknown numbers, messages he assumed were spam or creditors or some new indignity the universe had decided to inflict. The water was starting to soak through to his skin now, cold and disgusting, and he could smell the sour stench of it. Days-old pasta water mixed with soap scum and something that might have been spoiled milk. "You know what I love about this?" Derek said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences in his life. He was younger than Ethan by 5 years, blessed with the kind of chiseled jaw that suggested his ancestors had been too beautiful to develop critical thinking skills. "Van's been telling me for months how pathetic you are, but seeing it in person? Man, it's like watching a kicked puppy that doesn't even know it's allowed to bite back." Derek's hand slid across the table, gathering the divorce papers into a neat stack. He'd served them himself 20 minutes earlier, walking into the brunch with a process server's badge he'd borrowed from a friend, turning legal procedure into theater for Vanessa's amusement. "These are official now, by the way," Derek continued, tapping the papers with one finger. "Van gets the apartment, the car, and half of whatever pathetic savings you've got hidden away. You get to start over with nothing. Seems fair, doesn't it? I mean, you came into this marriage with nothing. You should leave with nothing." Vanessa's smile was radiant, cruel in its beauty. She'd been a marketing executive when they'd met, successful in her own right. But her mother's money had always loomed in the background, a safety net that had slowly transformed into a cage for their relationship. Every argument, every disagreement, Rebecca's wealth had been there, the implied threat that Ethan could be discarded at any moment, replaced with someone more suitable to their social station. "I just want this over with," Vanessa said, her voice carrying that particular tone of boredom wealthy people used when discussing matters beneath their attention. "Derek and I are moving to his place in the Hamptons next week. We'd like a clean break." Ethan's phone buzzed again, then again. Then it began to ring, the vibration insistent against his thigh. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Rebecca asked, her lip curling in disgust. "What bill collector is so desperate to reach you?" He pulled the phone out with wet fingers, leaving water stains on the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him swipe to answer. Perhaps it was the need to escape this conversation, even for a moment. Perhaps it was the strange way his mother's lawyer had looked at him at the funeral yesterday, that odd mixture of pity and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Mr. Montgomery." The voice was professional, female, with the crisp efficiency of someone used to dealing with important matters. "This is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh, Patterson & Klein. I'm the executor of your mother, Catherine Blackwell's estate. I've been trying to reach you all morning. We need you to come to our offices immediately. There are urgent matters regarding your inheritance that require your immediate attention and signature." "My mother didn't have an estate," Ethan said, aware that everyone at the table was listening now, their mockery temporarily suspended by curiosity. "She lived in a rent-controlled apartment. She worked as a bookkeeper for a nonprofit. There's nothing to inherit except maybe some debt." "Mr. Montgomery, I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but I can assure you that your mother's estate is substantial enough to require immediate legal attention. Can you come to our offices within the hour?" "How substantial?" There was a pause the kind lawyers made when they were calculating what they could and couldn't say. "Substantial enough that you should not sign any legal documents until we've had a chance to speak. Have you recently been served with divorce papers?" Ethan looked at Derek, at Vanessa, at Rebecca's expectant face. "Yes, about 20 minutes ago." "Do not sign them. Do not agree to anything. Come to our offices immediately. The address is—" "I know where you are," Ethan said quietly. Walsh, Patterson & Klein occupied the top 3 floors of the Meridian Tower downtown, the kind of law firm that represented corporations and billionaires, not bookkeepers who lived in studio apartments. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. He ended the call. The table was silent now, the laughter gone, replaced by something that looked almost like concern on Vanessa's face. Almost. "What was that about?" Rebecca demanded. "What inheritance?" I don't know, Ethan said, which was true. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a memory was stirring. He was 7 years old and his mother was tucking him into bed in their tiny apartment. He'd asked her why they lived differently than the other kids at his school, why some of his classmates had big houses and pools and vacation homes. She'd smoothed his hair back from his forehead and said something strange. We have more than them in the ways that matter, sweetheart. Money poisons everything it touches. I'm keeping you safe from that poison. He'd forgotten that conversation, or buried it, but it was surfacing now, along with dozens of other small oddities about his mother's life that had never quite made sense. The way she'd paid cash for everything. The mysterious trust fund that had appeared to cover his college tuition, which she'd explained as a scholarship, but which had never required grades or applications. The lawyer friends who sometimes came to dinner, men and women in expensive suits who seemed far too refined for their modest apartment. Well, whatever it is, it's not enough to save you from this divorce, Derek said. But his confidence had cracked slightly, a hairline fracture in his earlier certainty. Van's entitled to half of anything you get anyway. Community property laws, man. Anything that comes to you during the marriage is half hers. Ethan stood up. Water dripped from his clothes onto the country club floor, creating a small puddle that a waiter would have to clean up later. He could feel every eye in the restaurant on him now, could sense the shift in the room's energy from mockery to uncertainty. I'll be back, he said to no one in particular. You can't just leave. Vanessa stood up too, her chair scraping against the floor. We're in the middle of a divorce brunch? Ethan's voice was still quiet, but something had changed in it, some fundamental shift that made Vanessa take a half step backward. Yes, we are, and I'll be back to finish it. But first, I need to see some lawyers about my mother's estate. Your mother was nobody, Rebecca said, but there was a question in her voice now, a tremor of doubt. She worked for a nonprofit. She lived in a glorified closet. What kind of estate could she possibly... I guess we'll find out, Ethan said. He walked toward the exit, his wet shoes squeaking against the marble, his shirt clinging to his back. Derek called after him. Running away won't change anything, you pathetic... But Ethan was already gone, pushing through the brass-handled doors into the afternoon sunshine, leaving behind the laughter that was starting to sound nervous, uncertain, as if everyone at that table was beginning to suspect that they'd made a terrible mistake. The offices of Walsh, Patterson, and Klein occupied what Manhattan real estate developers called premium sky space, floors so high that the windows framed clouds rather than neighboring buildings. Jennifer Walsh's office was corner suite, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated luxury that cost more than ostentation ever could. She was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 40, with gray eyes that evaluated him with the same clinical precision a surgeon might use before making an incision. Mr. Montgomery, she said, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, professional. If she noticed he was still damp with dishwater, she was too polished to mention it. Please sit down. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water? Answers, Ethan said. You said my mother had a substantial estate. Jennifer opened a leather portfolio on her desk. Inside were documents, so many documents, stacked an inch thick. Your mother was Catherine Ann Blackwell, correct? Daughter of Thomas Blackwell? Founder of Blackwell Industries? The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Blackwell Industries. He'd heard of it. Everyone had heard of it. They manufactured semiconductors, held patents on half the technology in modern smartphones, had their fingers in aerospace, defense contracts, artificial intelligence. Forbes listed them as one of the 50 largest private companies in America. That's not possible, Ethan said. My mother's name was Catherine Montgomery. She changed it legally 34 years ago, 3 months after you were born, Jennifer said, sliding a document across the desk. Birth certificate amendment. She reverted to Montgomery, which was her mother's maiden name, and changed your surname as well. But she never relinquished her inheritance. She couldn't, actually. Her father, Thomas Blackwell, established an irrevocable trust that made Catherine the primary beneficiary and majority shareholder of Blackwell Industries. When he died 15 years ago, control of the company was supposed to pass to her. She refused it. Instead, she placed the shares in a blind trust managed by this firm, with instructions that should anything happen to her, everything would pass to you. Ethan couldn't breathe. The office seemed to tilt slightly, as if the building itself was unmoored from reality. How much? The shares in Blackwell Industries are currently valued at approximately $37 billion, Jennifer said calmly, as if she was discussing the weather rather than an amount of money that could fund a small country. There are also additional assets, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, art collections, various corporate bonds. In total, your inheritance is worth approximately $42 billion, making you one of the 50 wealthiest individuals in the United States. The number was so large it lost meaning, became abstract, a concept rather than currency. Ethan stared at the documents Jennifer was sliding across the desk. Stock certificates, property deeds, bank statements with balances that seemed to have too many zeros. Why? He finally managed. Why did she hide this from me? Jennifer's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her professional facade. Your mother left you a letter. She asked that I give it to you after I'd explained the inheritance. She pulled a cream-colored envelope from the portfolio, Catherine's handwriting on the front. For Ethan, when I'm gone. His hands shook as he opened it. His mother's handwriting filled 3 pages, the script elegant and precise, so characteristic of her careful nature. My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Jennifer has told you who I really was, who you really are. I know you must be confused, perhaps angry. I hid so much from you, not out of cruelty, but out of love. I grew up in a gilded cage, surrounded by wealth that corrupted everything it touched. My father was a brilliant man who believed money could solve any problem, buy any happiness. He was wrong. I watched that money destroy my siblings. Your Aunt Rachel died of a drug overdose at 23, chasing highs that could match the thrill of never hearing no. Your Uncle David is currently serving his 2nd prison sentence for fraud, unable to understand why the rules that apply to ordinary people should apply to him. I was the only one who saw what our wealth was doing to us. It insulated us from consequences, from reality, from the basic human experiences that teach us empathy and resilience. We were monsters, Ethan. Beautiful, educated, charitable monsters who thought our money made us better than everyone else. When I got pregnant with you, I knew I had to leave. Your father, and I'm sorry I never told you about him, perhaps that's a letter for another time, was from that same world, another wealthy family's son, and he was already showing signs of that same corruption. I couldn't let you grow up in that environment. I couldn't let you become what I'd been, so I left it all. I lived modestly, worked ordinary jobs, raised you in small apartments where you'd learn the value of things, the importance of earning rather than inheriting. I wanted you to develop character, compassion, the strength that comes from facing real struggles rather than having every problem solved with a checkbook. But I couldn't entirely escape my father's wishes. The trust was irrevocable. The inheritance would always be yours eventually. I've delayed it as long as I could, hoped to give you enough years in the real world to develop the wisdom to handle this burden. And it is a burden, my darling boy. $42 billion is not a gift. It's a terrible responsibility. It will change everything about your life. People will treat you differently, value you differently. Some will love you for your money, some will hate you for it. Very few will see you for who you really are. But I believe I've raised you right. I believe the man you've become, through struggle, through humiliation, through all the hardships I watched you endure and couldn't fix because fixing them would have defeated the purpose. I believe that man has the character to handle this wealth without letting it destroy him. Use it wisely, use it kindly. Use it to help others rather than elevate yourself. And remember, you are not your money. You are the boy who helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. You are the man who volunteered at homeless shelters. You are defined by your choices, not your bank account. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to guide you through this. I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused by keeping these secrets. But I'm not sorry for the way I raised you. You are my greatest accomplishment, Ethan. Not the Blackwell fortune. You. With all my love, Mom Ethan's eyes were burning. He read the letter 3 times. each word settling into his understanding, like stones creating a path across a river he hadn't known he needed to cross. "Take your time," Jennifer said quietly. But time was the one thing Ethan didn't have, because across town, at the Willowbrook Country Club, Vanessa and Rebecca and Derek were still celebrating his humiliation, still laughing about the dirty water, still assuming he was coming back to sign divorce papers that would give them half of everything he owned. Everything he now owned. "The divorce papers," Ethan said, his voice rough. "If I'd signed them before coming here, community property laws would have entitled your wife to half of your inheritance." "Yes," Jennifer confirmed. "Roughly $21 billion, plus half of any future earnings, which in your case would include dividends, investment income, and so forth. For the rest of her life, she would have been entitled to income from your mother's legacy. But I didn't sign them." "No, you didn't." Jennifer's smile was small but significant. "And now that you know about the inheritance, any settlement will be considerably different, especially given that your wife has been conducting an affair. I assume the man at brunch was her paramour." "Derek." "Yes. In New York, adultery affects divorce settlements. It won't prevent her from getting something, but it dramatically reduces what she's entitled to, especially if we can document the affair started before she filed for divorce." Ethan thought about the text messages on Vanessa's phone, the ones he'd seen by accident 3 months ago, the hotel receipts in her purse, the way Derek always seemed to know details about their marriage that Vanessa must have shared. "I can document it." "Good." Jennifer pulled out another document. "Then here's what I propose. We countersue for divorce on grounds of adultery. We offer her a settlement, something reasonable but nowhere near half. Given the circumstances, I'd recommend somewhere between $10 and $20 million. It's generous enough to seem fair, small enough to serve as punishment for her betrayal. $10 million, an amount that would have seemed impossible an hour ago, was now the lower end of reasonable." "What about her mother?" Ethan asked, remembering Rebecca's face as she'd poured the dirty water. "Rebecca, is there any legal action we can take? For assault with dishwater at a country club brunch?" Jennifer shook her head. "Probably not worth pursuing legally, but there are other ways to address her behavior." "Such as?" Jennifer's smile widened slightly, and for the first time, Ethan saw something beyond professional courtesy in her expression. It looked almost like anticipation. "Rebecca Morrison serves on the board of several charitable organizations, I believe. She's quite active in society fundraising circles. She never lets anyone forget it. Those organizations all depend on donations from wealthy benefactors, donors who might be very interested in having someone like you, the new majority owner of Blackwell Industries, involved in their causes, someone who might prefer to work with different board members, someone who might suggest that certain current board members have engaged in behavior unbecoming of their positions." The implications settled over Ethan like a coat tailored specifically for revenge. Rebecca's entire social identity was built on her charity work, her position of respect and influence. To lose that would be to lose everything she valued about herself. "That seems cruel," Ethan said slowly. "Your mother didn't raise you to be cruel," Jennifer agreed, "but she also didn't raise you to be a doormat. There's a difference between kindness and weakness, Mr. Montgomery. Your wife and her mother have been abusing that kindness for years. It's time they learned the difference too." Ethan stood up, walked to the window. From 47 stories up, Manhattan looked like a game board. All those people moving through their lives, unaware that one person's circumstances had just shifted so dramatically that reality itself seemed rearranged. "I need to think about this," he said. "Of course, but Mr. Montgomery, those divorce papers, if they come back to you, if Vanessa pressures you to sign them, don't. Not until we've had time to prepare the proper response. Can you promise me that?" "I promise." "Good. Then I'll have my team begin preparing the counterfiling. In the meantime," Jennifer pulled out a black credit card from her desk drawer. "This is temporary access to one of your accounts. There's $50 million available on it. Go buy yourself some new clothes, a hotel suite, whatever you need. You shouldn't go back to the apartment you shared with Vanessa. Not until the legal situation is resolved." Ethan took the card. It felt like any other piece of plastic. no heavier despite the weight it represented. 50 million for clothes and a hotel room. Think of it as your mother's final gift. She lived modestly for 34 years to teach you values. Now she's gone, and you have permission to live comfortably. I think she'd want that for you. The Willowbrook Country Club was even more crowded when Ethan returned 3 hours later. He'd stopped at Tom Ford on Fifth Avenue, where assistants who would have sneered at him that morning suddenly became obsequious when he'd presented Jennifer's black card. He wore a navy suit now, custom-fitted, Italian leather shoes, a watch that cost more than most people's cars. He'd showered at the plaza, where he'd taken a suite, washed away the dishwater, and with it some of the humiliation. But not all of it. That still burned. Vanessa, Rebecca, and Derek were exactly where he'd left them, though they'd moved from brunch to afternoon cocktails. They looked up when Ethan approached, and he watched the confusion ripple across their faces as they tried to reconcile the man in front of them with the one they'd degraded hours earlier. "Ethan," Vanessa's voice was uncertain. "What? Where did you get that suit?" "I had a meeting," Ethan said calmly, pulling out a chair and sitting down without invitation. "With my mother's lawyers." Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "Dude, you can't just buy expensive clothes and expect us to believe." "Believe what you want," Ethan interrupted, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that silenced Derek immediately. "I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to discuss the divorce." "Finally ready to sign the papers?" Vanessa asked, but her confidence was wavering. She'd noticed the suit too, the watch, the way other diners were looking at their table with a new kind of attention. "No," Ethan said. "I'm here to deliver a counteroffer. Vanessa, you filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. I'm counterfiling on grounds of adultery, with documented evidence of your affair with Derek starting at least 8 months ago. Under New York law, that significantly affects any settlement you're entitled to." The blood drained from Vanessa's face. You don't have evidence. Text messages, hotel receipts, witness testimonies from 3 separate individuals who saw you and Derek together while you were still my wife." Ethan kept his voice level, factual. "My lawyers have compiled quite a file, but I'm not interested in a drawn-out legal battle. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. $10 million, paid over 5 years. You keep your car, your personal belongings. The apartment returns to me." $10 million. Rebecca started to laugh, but it died in her throat when she saw Ethan's expression. "That's insane," Derek said. "Where would you even get $10 million? I'm the sole heir to Catherine Blackwell's estate," Ethan said calmly. "My mother was the majority shareholder of Blackwell Industries. The inheritance totals approximately $42 billion. So yes, Derek, I think I can manage to scrape together $10 million for a divorce settlement." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Vanessa's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Rebecca made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Derek just stared, his handsome face frozen in an expression of dawning horror. "That's not possible," Vanessa whispered. "Your mother was a bookkeeper. She lived in a tiny apartment. She was nobody." "She was Catherine Blackwell," Ethan said, "and she chose to live modestly because she believed wealth corrupted people. She wanted to raise me with different values. She succeeded." Rebecca was shaking her head, her earlier superiority shattered. "If that's true, then the divorce settlement should be, community property laws mean Vanessa gets half." "Would have gotten half," Ethan corrected. "If I'd signed those papers you all thought were so amusing earlier. If I'd agreed to the settlement before I knew about the inheritance. But I didn't, and now the settlement is based on New York adultery laws, which are considerably less generous to unfaithful spouses." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, set it on the table. "This is a formal offer from my legal team. $10 million, Vanessa. It's more money than you'll ever need, more than most people see in a lifetime. Take it, or we go to court, and a jury decides what you deserve. I promise you, when they see the evidence of your affair, when they hear about the dishwater your mother threw on me while you laughed, when they understand that you served me divorce papers at a family hangout 4 days after my mother's funeral, they won't be generous." Vanessa was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. "Ethan, please, I didn't know. If you'd known, you would have treated me differently," Ethan finished. Yes, I'm aware. That's the point, isn't it? You valued me based on what you thought I could provide, not on who I was. You, your mother, Derek, you all decided I was worthless because I didn't have money. You never once considered that I might have other qualities worth respecting. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. The offer expires in 48 hours. Accept it or don't. Either way, our marriage is over. Wait, Rebecca said, her voice cracking. She looked decades older than she had that morning, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. The charity board positions I hold, the fundraising committees, are you? Will you? I haven't decided yet, Ethan said honestly. I'm meeting with several charitable organizations next week to discuss my philanthropic interests. I'll be reviewing their current board compositions, their effectiveness, their leadership. And if I find board members who seem more interested in social status than actual charity work, who abuse their positions to feel superior to others, who throw dishwater on grieving widowers at country club brunches, well, I imagine I'll have opinions about whether those individuals should continue representing organizations I support financially. Rebecca made a small, broken sound. But that's next week's concern, Ethan continued. Today, I'm just here to deliver divorce terms and to give you all something to think about. You assumed I was worthless because I didn't have money. My mother spent 34 years teaching me that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account. She was right. I was valuable before this inheritance, and I'm valuable after it. The only thing that's changed is now I have the resources to ensure that people like you face consequences for treating others as less than human. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Derek. Oh, and Derek, that personal training business of yours, the one at the gym on 53rd Street? You might want to check your lease renewal. I believe Blackwell Industries owns that building. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but I hear the new ownership is planning to triple the commercial rents. Something about bringing the property values in line with the neighborhood standards. I'm sure you'll find another location, though. Maybe somewhere more affordable, like New Jersey. Derek's face went white. Ethan walked away then, leaving them all sitting in the wreckage of their assumptions. Behind him, he could hear Vanessa sobbing, Rebecca trying to speak through shock, Derek cursing in quiet, impotent fury. It should have felt better than it did. Revenge was supposed to be sweet, satisfying, cathartic. Instead, Ethan just felt tired. Tired and sad and aware that his mother had been right about everything. The money had changed how people treated him, but it hadn't changed who he was. He was still the same person who'd been covered in dishwater that morning, still carrying the same grief over his mother's death, still hurt by his wife's betrayal. The only difference was now people would pretend those things mattered to them. Now people would pretend to care. His phone buzzed. Jennifer Walsh. How did it go? Like you predicted, Ethan typed back. They're devastated. Good, that's good. Not because revenge is sweet, but because consequences are important. They need to learn that actions have consequences, even for people with money and status. Maybe especially for people with money and status. My mother would have said the same thing, Ethan replied. Your mother was a wise woman. I wish I'd known her better. Ethan pocketed his phone and stepped out into the Manhattan evening. The city glittered around him, all those lights representing lives and dreams and struggles. $42 billion couldn't solve anyone's real problems, couldn't bring back his mother, couldn't repair his broken marriage, couldn't undo the humiliation of that morning. But it could buy justice. It could create consequences. It could ensure that the next time someone thought about pouring dirty water on a grieving stranger, they might hesitate, might wonder if that stranger had resources they couldn't see, dignity they couldn't measure, worth they'd underestimated. 2 days later, Vanessa signed the settlement, $10 million paid over 5 years, in exchange for her silence and a quick divorce. Rebecca was quietly asked to step down from 3 charity boards, her resignation accepted with the kind of polite efficiency that suggested everyone had been waiting for an excuse to remove her. Derek's gym lease renewal was denied, and last Ethan heard he'd moved to Philadelphia, where the rent was cheaper and his reputation hadn't preceded him. Ethan didn't feel victorious. He felt like a man who'd learned an expensive lesson about human nature, paid for with his mother's lifetime of sacrifice, and his own mourning covered in dishwater. He established a foundation in Catherine's name, focused on helping people living in poverty, funding education, supporting workers' rights. He sold the Blackwell Industries shares to a management group and invested the proceeds in sustainable businesses, affordable housing, medical research. He remembered his mother's warning. You are not your money. 6 months later, he met someone new. Emma was a high school teacher who'd never heard of Blackwell Industries, who knew Ethan only as the quiet man who volunteered at the community center where she ran after-school programs. She liked him for his kindness, his willingness to listen, his gentle humor. When he finally told her about the inheritance, she was quiet for a long time. Does it change anything? Ethan asked, afraid of the answer. It changes what restaurants we can afford, Emma said with a small smile. But it doesn't change who you are. Money doesn't do that. It just reveals what was always there. She was right, of course, just like his mother had been right. The money hadn't changed him. It had just changed who was paying attention, who was laughing, who was pouring the water. And in the end, that made all the difference.